This manuscript of Leonardo's hydraulic design for an Italian garden dates back to 1500. The manuscript details a water circulation system Leonardo envisions for a Garden of Delights by Charles d'Ambrose, the French governor of Milan at that time. It was found while a scholar was digging through the dusted remnants of the governor's documents, which were thought to be useless by now. The manuscript of Leonardo slipped off a binder of the contracts that were related to the construction of the Garden of Delight.
To understand Leonardo's manuscript, first we need to learn a little bit about the early Renaissance Italian garden. So it was not until the 13th centuries that gardens are starting to be built, because that was when the political situation was more stable, such that wealthier classes are settling down in one place for more than 1 year. One of the characteristics of Italian Renaissance garden is that they held really exotic plants, and that's according to the preferences of the person who commissioned the garden. So according to David Coffin, who is an art historian at Princeton University who studies intensively about Italian Renaissance garden, some of those plants include orange, marine cherries, pines, and spruce. And one of the ideas that this developed from this kind of exotic plant idea is the technique of orangery, quote unquote. It's the idea that people would put orange in big terracotta pots and move it indoor in the winter whenever the Florence weather was too cold for orange to survive, and bring it outdoors when it is nice and warm enough for the orange to live.
There are actually problems with this orangery practice. For example, it is really troublesome to move the plots indoors every winter, and at the same time, the indoor fire, which was supposed to keep the plant warm, actually deprives it of water and moist. As a result, we believe this to be Leonardo's creative solution to the problem using hydraulic knowledge. In this manuscript, we see a circulation of water. First, water comes from an outsourced spring, goes through a mill before it enters the underground. And around the mill, we can see some design details. For example, the middle part, the wheel of the mill, is actually made up of 4 different parts, and the whole structure is held together with a spiral screw. Once it enters the underground, it goes through some pipe before it turns into vapor and mists. And these vapor and mist actually cap the temperature of the spring. As a result, once they are sprayed onto the orange or lemon, they're able to keep those exotic plants alive, especially in the winter. As a result, we believe that Leonardo was able to provide a solution to the orangery practice by taking advantage of the temperature of the spring in the winter time, which saves the problem of having to move the pots indoors every winter, at the same time being able to keep them alive in a natural environment.
To understand Leonardo's manuscript of his hydraulic system design in the Italian garden, there are 4 really strong supporting evidence. The first one is Leonardo's love for water, and second is his hydraulic design studies. Third is his previous work of hydraulic design for other patrons, and the fourth, we're going to talk about his specific work for Charles d'Ambrose. Leonardo is a curious scientist as well as an artist, as we all know. His curiosity does not only span war machine, human anatomy, but also water itself. So he put together Codex Leicester, which is 72 pages of drawings and writings about his studies of water, how it changes volume, changes shape while in motion. And he's enthralled by the beauty of water. And this 15-chapter codex talks about the water itself, the seawater, the underground water, and how he can transport water. And this intensive study really lays foundation for Leonardo when he's trying to design a hydraulic system in the Italian garden. Second, Leonardo doesn't only study water, he also applies his learnings about waters in his hydraulic design. So Leonardo has been exposed to hydraulic work for a really long time. While he was in Ludovico Sforza's court in Milan, he really studies the city planning of Milan, where there's drainage system, there's irrigation system, and there are infrastructures installed for water diversion. And when he moves to Florence, he really implements his ideas and his learnings about these hydraulic work from Milan into helping Florence residents getting clean water from the Arno River. Third, this is not the only time Leonardo has implemented his hydraulic design for an Italian garden. So while he was in Ludovico Sforza's court in Milan, he actually helped him design water diversion system. So according to Codex Atlanticus, which is a Leonardo's combination of manuscript about his various studies on water body and other stuff, he mentioned that he stressed multifunctionality of a garden as well as the beauty of the garden. So in this codex, he mentioned one of his design for Sforza, which is having a reservoir at the back of a garden and then using a water diversion system to drive the water from the reservoir to the garden and then disperse them around the garden using a water pipe. And this kind of design we can also see in our found manuscript. Last, let's talk about specifically this manuscript. First, why does it belong to Leonardo? And second, what he was actually depicting. So while Leonardo was in Milan in the 15th century, 1500, Charles d'Ambrose, who is the Lord of Chaumont, the Chancellor of France, but also the Governor of Milan at that time, was commissioned a suburban villa for himself. And in the villa, there is a Garden of Delight. And Leonardo specifically was commissioned for the hydraulic work in the garden. So in Leonardo's Codex Atlanticus, he actually envisioned this kind of system for Charles d'Ambrose's garden. So he mentioned in the Codex that he's gonna bring a spring from an outside source into the garden through a mill, and then have the spring go underground in a pipe, and then the pipe's gonna turn the spring into vapors that have temperatures benign to the growth of the plants and disperse the vapor around the plants for the irrigation purpose. So Leonardo's design actually solved the problem that we mentioned at the very beginning of this video, which is the problem of keeping exotic plants alive in the garden. So in our manuscript here, it perfectly reflects Leonardo's idea about this garden. So he brings the spring from outside through the mill into the garden and bring the spring into a water pipe, turns it around in the underground and then turns the spring into vapors, which in turn is going to be sprayed around exotic plants such as orange and lemon.
This finding is important because it showed us what the garden would have looked like, which was previously unfinished. And it also showed us how it would work from a practical sense due to Leonardo's designs. In addition, it further shows that Leonardo was a scientist and was able to translate his love for water and hydraulics into art.